All right, ready to dive deep into the world of motivational podcasts. You guys gave us a pretty incredible list to work with. 12 podcasts, all promising to level up our lives. We're talking about maximizing productivity, finding happiness, the whole shebang.
And we're going to break each one down. We'll unpack the good stuff, the methodologies, the advice that really stands out, even those little unexpected gems that make these podcasts so interesting.
Sounds like a plan. So, kicking things off, we have Optimal Living Daily, hosted by Justin Malik. This one really stood out to me because it's all about efficiency, perfect for those of us constantly on the go.
Yeah, the format's actually pretty unique. Justin curates the best content from personal development blogs and, get this, reads them to you.
Wait, so it's kind of like Cliff's Notes for personal development, but for your ears.
Exactly. It's like getting the core insights from tons of books and blogs without actually having to read all of them.
That's pretty genius. Especially if, like me, you're always short on time, but you want to keep learning and growing. What kind of topics does he actually cover?
Oh, it's a huge range. You've got productivity hacks to help you squeeze the most out of your day, minimalist living principles to declutter your space and your mind, even tips on building better habits.
So, like a sampler platter of personal development wisdom.
Nice.
Okay, next on the list is The Psychology of Your 20s with Gemma Speg, and let's be honest, who didn't feel completely lost during that decade.
The 20s can be tough. What I like about Gemma's podcast is she really tackles those common issues head on. Anxiety, imposter syndrome, the works.
Does she give any solutions, or is it just like wallowing in the misery? Because sometimes I feel like I get stuck in that loop.
Oh, she absolutely offers solutions. She blends those psychological insights with actual coping strategies. For example, she has this whole 5-step process for overcoming imposter syndrome.
Ooh, action steps. Love those. Speaking of navigating life, if you're looking to design a life you love, we got to talk about the Lavender Lifestyle podcast hosted by Aileen Zhu. This one feels very intentional living to me.
You hit the nail on the head. Aileen's all about personal growth and self-discovery, really aligning your life with your values and aspirations.
I've heard she's big on vision boards. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's about creating that visual representation of your dreams and goals to keep them top of mind.
I can see how that visual reminder could be helpful. Okay, now for all the entrepreneurs and aspiring business owners out there, we've got the Marie Forleo podcast. Marie has this energy. She's all about taking action.
Marie is a powerhouse when it comes to business and marketing. Her podcast is super practical, She gives actionable strategies instead of just vague advice.
So it's not just follow your dreams, but actual steps on how to build a business.
Exactly. Everything from branding to productivity, she breaks it down.
That's awesome. All right, shifting gears a bit, we have Good Life Project, hosted by Jonathan Fields. This one seems less about quick fixes and more about, exploring the deeper meaning of life, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's about resilience, finding purpose, meaning. He interviews people from all walks of life who've faced adversity and come out stronger.
So less about hustle harder and more about finding meaning in the midst of all the chaos. I dig that. What kind of guests does he have on the show? Are they all gurus and CEOs?
Oh, no, he has everyone. Artists, entrepreneurs, activists, spiritual teachers. The diversity is incredible. It's like you get exposed to all these different perspectives on what it means to live a good life.
I love that. Okay, next up is Tiny Leap, Big Changes with Greg Clunas. This one feels like a really practical guide to making progress without getting overwhelmed.
Greg's all about breaking down those big goals into smaller, more manageable steps.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I psych myself out before I even start because the goal seems so huge.
Exactly. Greg's philosophy is all about consistency and building momentum over time, one tiny step at a time.
Then there's the Mind Valley Show with Vishen. This one seems to have this super global, forward-thinking vibe.
It brings together thought leaders from all over the world, people who are pushing the boundaries of personal growth. They talk about all kinds of stuff, from biohacking to mindfulness to futuristic concepts.
Hold up. Biohacking? That sounds intense. What exactly is that? Am I going to have to turn into a cyborg?
Not quite. Think of it as using tools and techniques to improve your biology, to perform at your peak.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Now, let's talk about a podcast that's been around for a while, delivering daily doses of motivation. Daily Boost Motivation and Coaching with Scott Smith.
Scott's commitment is amazing. He's been providing listeners with a shot of motivation every single day for years.
Every single day. Wow. I barely remember to brush my teeth every day. So what kind of topics does he cover in these daily pep talks?
Everything you can imagine. Building confidence, conquering self-doubt, setting goals, achieving success. It's like having a motivational coach in your pocket.
I love that. Okay, now for a podcast, that sounds like it's right up my alley. Hidden Brain, hosted by Shankar Vedantam. The title alone makes me think this is perfect for the science nerds among us.
It's a really cool blend of science and storytelling. It dives into those unconscious patterns that drive our behavior, the reasons behind our choices and actions, those hidden forces that shape our lives.
So, like understanding those subconscious biases and patterns we're often not even aware of.
Exactly. It's like peering behind the curtain of our own minds.
I'm already feeling more insightful. Okay, should we take a quick break before diving into the rest of the podcasts?
Sounds good to me. We'll be back in a flash to unpack even more motivational gold.
Can't wait.
Back again, ready for more podcast goodness.
Let's do it. So, you mentioned earlier that optimal living daily is like having blog posts read to you. What makes that approach so effective?
Well, for one thing, you get exposed to all these different writing styles, different perspectives. It's like broadens your understanding of personal development.
Right, like a buffet of wisdom.
Mm.
Do you have any specific examples of blog posts he's featured that really stood out?
One that comes to mind is this post about micro habits. It was all about those tiny little actions you can add to your day, like taking the stairs instead of the elevator or 5 minutes of stretching in the morning.
Ah, those small changes that add up over time. I like that. Now, I'm really curious about Gemma Sisbeg and the psychology of your 20s. You said she actually gives advice for navigating those common 20-something struggles.
Oh, totally. She has this great episode about dealing with difficult family dynamics, something I think a lot of young adults can relate to.
That's such a tough one, figuring out those boundaries,
Yeah.
especially when you're trying to establish your independence. Does she offer any like specific scripts or phrases you can use in those conversations?
She does. She provides some scripts and even encourages practicing self-compassion, reminding yourself it's okay to make mistakes, especially when it comes to family.
So important. Okay, let's talk about designing your dream life with Aileen Ziu and the Lavender Lifestyle podcast. You mentioned visualization, right?
Yeah, she's big on that. In one episode, she walks listeners through this visualization where they imagine their ideal day, like from the moment they wake up to when they go to sleep.
So you're basically creating this mental picture of the life you want. I can see how that would be powerful, but what if you're someone who doesn't even know where to start? That seems kind of overwhelming.
She addresses that. Eileen's all about, starting small, focusing on one area you want to improve. It's a journey, not a destination.
Right, baby steps.
Oh, the...
Love it. Okay, let's switch gears to the Marie Forleo podcast and her advice for entrepreneurs. What kind of actionable strategies does she offer?
One of her most popular episodes is all about creating a compelling brand story. It's like the narrative that captures your business connects with your audience on an emotional level.
Okay, so how's that different from a mission statement? Aren't they kind of the same thing?
A mission statement's more about the purpose and values, right?
Yeah.
The brand story's about evoking emotions, painting a picture.
So it's like giving your business a personality. Now, Good Life Project.
Yeah.
You mentioned this podcast has such a diverse range of guests. Did any particular story stand out to you?
One that stuck with me was about this Wall Street exec who, left his high-powered job to become a photographer. He was talking about taking risks and following your passion.
I bet that was inspiring. Did he have any advice for people who are afraid to make those big leaps of faith?
He talked about the importance of having a support system, people who believe in you even when you doubt yourself, and taking those calculated risks.
That's great advice. Okay, let's talk about taking action with tiny leap, big changes. Can you give us an example of how Greg Clunis breaks down goals into those smaller steps?
Let's say your goal is to write a book. Greg might suggest starting with, just 100 words a day.
It's like instead of freaking out about writing a whole book, you're focusing on those little chunks.
Yeah.
Totally manageable.
Exactly. Consistency and momentum, that's the key.
Now, I got to admit, I'm still a little confused about biohacking and the Mind Valley show. What are some other examples of those techniques they talk about?
They've had guests on who talk about cold exposure therapy. Supposed to boost energy and immunity, they say. And nootropics, which are supplements for brain function and memory.
Some of that sounds a bit out there, but hey, I'm all for exploring new things. But doesn't it require, specialized knowledge or equipment to do some of that stuff?
Show's really good at explaining everything in a way that makes sense, and they always provide resources for people who want to dig deeper.
Okay, so you don't have to be a scientist to try it out. Now let's talk about those daily doses of motivation from Daily Boost Motivation and Coaching. How does Scott Smith help listeners stay on track?
He's really good at reframing negative thoughts. He has this technique where you replace a negative thought with a positive affirmation.
So instead of saying, I'm not good enough, you'd say, I am capable and deserving of success.
Exactly. It's all about shifting that internal dialogue, replacing those negative thoughts with positive ones.
That's powerful stuff. But what about those days when you're just feeling blah, no matter how many affirmations you say?
He talks about that too. He reminds people that motivation comes and goes, that it's important to take care of yourself and rest when you need to.
Now, hidden brain, such a cool concept.
Yeah.
What are some of the insights Shankar Vedantam shares about how our minds work?
He has this one episode about choice architecture, which is the idea that the way choices are presented can actually influence our decisions.
Wait, really? Can you give me an example?
Like, if you put healthy foods at eye level in a cafeteria, people are more likely to choose them.
So our choices are being manipulated. That's a little freaky.
It is, but Shankar also talks about how understanding these biases can help us make more conscious choices.
So it's about awareness then. Now, for our Hindi-speaking listeners, we have Gita for the Young and Restless. How does Jairo connect those ancient teachings to modern issues?
Imagine you're feeling super overwhelmed by all the information and stimulation in the world today, right? Jairo might draw on a verse from the Gita that talks about finding stillness and inner peace.
So it's like ancient wisdom for modern problems. That's really cool. Okay, Happier with Gretchen Rubin. This one's super popular. What are some of the fun tips they share for boosting happiness?
They have this challenge called 1 week outer order, inner calm. Basically, you tackle clutter in different areas of your life.
So it's about decluttering your physical space, your digital life, even your relationships.
Yep. The idea is that creating order externally can create a sense of peace internally.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And finally, we have The Habit Coach with Ashton Doctor. You mentioned he's all about building good habits. What are some of his strategies?
One of his most popular tips is the 2-minute rule. Basically, if you can start a new habit in under 2 minutes, it's much more likely to stick.
So instead of trying to run for 30 minutes, you just focus on putting on your running shoes and stepping outside for 2 minutes.
Exactly. It's about lowering that barrier to entry.
And then hopefully you're motivated to keep going. I like that. What about breaking bad habits? Any tips for that?
He talks about habit replacement. So instead of just trying to stop a bad habit, you replace it with a positive one.
So if you're trying to stop scrolling through social media before bed, you might replace that with reading a book instead.
You got it. Rewiring those neural pathways.
We covered so much today. It's amazing how much variety there is in the world of motivational podcasts.
Right. And we've just scratched the surface. There's so much great stuff out there.
I need a minute to process all this amazing advice.
Take a breath, let it all sink in, and then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts on how to actually apply all these incredible insights.
All right, we're back, ready to wrap up our motivational podcast extravaganza. It's been a lot to take in. I'm feeling pretty inspired, honestly.
Definitely a whirlwind of information. All that practical advice, the deep dives into how our minds work. These podcasts really do offer so much.
But how do we actually, put all this amazing advice into practice? It's easy to get caught up in learning new stuff, but then real life happens and those good intentions kind of fade away.
Yeah, bridging the gap between inspiration and action, right? It's like having all the ingredients for an incredible meal, but never actually cooking it.
So how do we actually cook the meal, so to speak? Do we have to listen to every single episode of all 12 podcasts?
Definitely not. Start by figuring out what really spoke to you. Which podcasts got you the most excited? Which ones tackled something you're actually trying to work on in your own life?
So be selective. Focus on what aligns with our goals right now. What if those goals change, though? Do we have to start all over?
Nope. Personal growth's an ongoing journey, right? It's totally normal to revisit podcasts or find new ones as things shift.
Okay, that makes me feel better. I was starting to get a little overwhelmed. So once we've got our list narrowed down, what's the next step?
Time for action. Pick one thing, one piece of advice, or a technique you want to try out. Could be something small, like trying Gemma's 5-step process for imposter syndrome, or using Greg's tiny leap approach for one of your goals.
So one small, actionable step. No need to completely overhaul everything overnight.
Exactly. Start small, be consistent, and celebrate those wins along the way.
One thing that's been hitting me as we've been talking is that motivation isn't always about achieving those huge goals. It can be about finding joy in those everyday moments too, right?
Absolutely. Cultivating gratitude, being present, appreciating the little things, it all plays a role.
Maybe motivation's less about pushing ourselves and more about just like enjoying the ride.
I think you're onto something.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's something that I've noticed woven through all these podcasts. They're all about embracing the present, being kind to ourselves, and never stopping learning.
And speaking of learning, as we were diving into these podcasts, one thing that really jumped out at me was how much they all talked about self-awareness.
Oh, yeah, that's crucial. Knowing your values, your strengths, your weaknesses, your patterns, it's all key for making good choices and creating a life you actually love.
It's like, Al, you need that roadmap and compass for the journey. Got to know where you're headed.
And these podcasts, they provide that in such a fun, engaging way. It's like having a bunch of supportive friends cheering you on.
It does feel like we've covered a ton today, but also like we're just getting started.
That's personal growth for you. Always something new to learn, new things to discover about ourselves and the world.
And these podcasts are the perfect companions for that journey.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of motivational podcasts. Hopefully you found some new faves, maybe even some nuggets of wisdom to help you create that life you're dreaming of.
Remember, the journey's yours to create. Embrace it. Be kind to yourself, and don't underestimate the power of a good podcast to keep you inspired.